is February 19th, 2019. This is a business meeting of the North Kingstown School Committee. If I could ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Glassbach?
Here.
Mrs. Holtzman? Here. Mrs. Hoskins? Here. Mr. Bob Jones?
Here.
Mr. Tony Jones? Here. Mrs. Schott? Here. And Susan?
And if you could please call the calendar.
Tuesday, March 5th, 2019, there will be a CLEC meeting at 6:30 at Davisville Academy at 50 East Court. Tuesday, March 12th is a school committee business meeting. And Tuesday, March 26th is a school committee business meeting.
Thank you. Any recognitions this evening?
Yes. First of all, I want to point out that at our next meeting, I plan on putting together kind of a list of winter sports results. There are a number of things going on. Wrestling had a really good weekend, for instance, so track and field, but I don't want to miss out on anything, so I'll ask our AD to put together some summary results on that. I also want to take this moment to congratulate Dr. Michelle Humbert. Her retirement is on the agenda tonight, and I can't thank her enough for what she has meant to me and my work, and for this district. We've had, tremendous results in her years here, and particularly in terms of curriculum and instruction. She's a great mentor to our principals. I consider it a real privilege to have worked with you, and you're going to be missed, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
And I'd like to second that as well. It's been a pleasure working with you. It's going to be very tough shoes to fill. And I wish you the best, though, in all your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda would be citizens' comments. So for citizens' comments, we had a sign-up sheet. If you did not sign up, that's okay. I'll call anyone else who'd like to speak at the end. We do ask that you please state your name and address for the record, and if you could please limit your comments to 3 minutes. So if I could have the first person who asked to speak, and I apologize for mispronouncing any names. Pinheiro?
Last meeting, you told us you're about to take action on Forest Park. Since there is one proposal, you effectively told us you are planning to pass it. Why I'm here to still fight for my kids, because I do not believe they are the only solution to this problem. Your plan doesn't take into consideration our kids' social, emotional health, which is critical in education. You offer no options or flexibility in your plan. I take issue with your process. You claim you want community input and involvement, but having one proposal certainly seems to contradict this. You want to know why we can't fill this room? Because you are targeting so few families, significantly increasing the burden on these few. If you wanted community involvement, you would have conducted surveys at the schools for parents and teachers to determine what people would hope for, what would make this best, and to gather ideas for other options. Maybe it's more important that kids are in closed classrooms because it's better for their learning than distance travel. You have one proposal on the table because you felt it would confuse us to have more than one. Well, I'm here to tell you I would not be confused by multiple proposals, and I don't believe anyone else would either. Multiple proposals would allow for real debate and real community involvement. You may be overwhelmed by the amount of questions this would generate, but we would feel you value our input. We understand the numbers need to work, but if redistricting is necessary, then we should make it count. This town has a history of multiple redistricting episodes in a short span. We have all talked to people who have had their kids in multiple elementary schools. Research shows mobility among students has a negative impact on education. The current proposal does not accomplish your goals, and it is short-sighted. You insist you are making a significant impact at Stony, but to me, a difference of 8 students, 2%, is not a significant impact. This is a major component of the plan that does not sit well with us. Why would you remove our kids and replace them with new kids? To me,
Thank you. Next person is Jay Panero.
It's on this time? Yeah. Excellent. James Panero, 710 Slocum Road. All right. We left off? Okay. So if your priority is to limit impact, then a plan that only moving students at Forest Park should be considered. Students on our bus, our kids' bus, are on the bus for 45 to 47 minutes a day. 4 stops planned in the middle of town. Hopscotching kids down to Hamilton does not seem like it's that far-fetched. But if you truly want to accomplish your goals and effectively make change, you need to consider a larger redistricting plan that has a shelf life of 6 years at least. Students are in your elementary care for 6 years. A plan that only has a 2-year life is not adequate. That plan does not have to be enacted in year 1. It could be phased in over 2 years, but it should at least encompass a 6-year window, if not more. In talking to families impacted by this redistricting plan, we're in different phases with our kids, and what is best for one family would not be best for another. A larger redistricting plan that would allow phasing in and grandfathering to 3rd through 5th for those who are vested in their current schools would be a better option. As part of that, I propose to expand the redistricting to include the Glen and Slocum Woods. First, this would help align the middle school boundaries. Right now, Stony Lane is about to have a slice of its community taken off and given to Hamilton. Kids who are not redistricted in 2 years, that community is going to be broken up again. Why not put the new plan to line up with the middle school boundary, get the Glen and Slocum Woods down to Hamilton where you can have some real change. You could then add more students from Forest Park to Stony Lane. All right. You could then also offer grandfathering once again for 3rd through 5th grade. Sorry, hang on. You could also eliminate the need of the gamble for the lottery. The chances of you having to come back next year for more redistricting would significantly decrease. Most importantly, this would decrease the burden on the students because you're moving a larger group of kids. A larger community would move to the new school, and it would decrease the burden on those kids. Having to change schools as a large group would provide much more support and comfort to our children. This plan would allow flexibility and options for families to adjust. In conclusion, what is best for our kids is to either not change schools at all or alternatively move with a bigger group, bigger community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Denise Langfield.
Denise Langfield, 44 Antelope Circle. I have 2 kids who go to school in North Kingstown. I have a 6th grader at Wickford Middle School and a 3rd grader at Stony Lane. With the proposed redistricting, my younger daughter would attend Hamilton next year as a 4th grader. While I understand redistricting is necessary because Forest Park is over cap, I don't quite agree that the current proposal will cause the least amount of disruption for students. Shifting these students is only resulting in a 2% decrease in enrollment at Stony Lane. Stony Lane isn't over cap and can handle taking on the Forest Park students without displacing its current students. I understand that in coming years, if Stony does get closer to cap, then it may be necessary to move our neighborhood along with surrounding neighborhoods like the Glen and Slocum Woods. This would be a much easier move for students if they had more of their peers going along with them to a new school. In my opinion, the better option would be to either take all of the students now, including the Glen and Slocum Woods, or wait until it is actually necessary to do so. My 3rd grader is extremely invested in Stony Lane. She watched her older sister graduate from Stony last year and was looking forward to following in her footsteps over the next couple of years. She has spent the last 3.5 years bonding with her classmates and teachers, involving herself in activities in school and out, and above all is thriving in her environment. I would hate to see her have to start over at a new school with only 2 years left. If you are adamant about moving our neighborhood to Hamilton, I'd ask you to grandfather in upcoming 3rd and 4th graders along with the 5th graders, with the same stipulation that they provide their own transportation. I feel that this is the least that can be done to help the families with students in upper grades. talk to any parent, teacher, or student, and they will tell you that being the new kid in first grade is very different from being the new kid in fourth grade. I'd like to thank Dr. Auger for taking the time to meet with me after the last school committee meeting. I had suggested grandfathering in grades 3 to 5 when I met with him, and he assured me he would look at the numbers and come to this meeting ready to advise whether or not this is a feasible option. I look forward to this being included in the discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are the only people who've signed up, but that doesn't mean you don't have the opportunity to speak. If there's anyone who didn't sign up and would like to, you can come to the microphone. Please, again, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Kate Scott, 10 Jasmine Circle. My kids go to Hamilton, and my question is more about Hamilton resources. It's the only elementary school that's on a main road. It's at a 5-way intersection. And just a week and a half ago, there was a car accident involving one of the vans that runs as a school bus as the van tried to turn into the school. So if you're hoping to add upwards of 100 students, I really hope there's some thought given to what we can do to make that area safer, as well as parking. If you've ever been there at the end of the day to pick up the kids, it is a disaster. Constant. The parking lot is not designed for students, TAs, teachers, administration, and parents. It's a mess. So as we look to adding more kids into that school, I'm hoping some thought is given into the resources as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Okay. Next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Dr. Auger?
So thank you, and thank you for those comments tonight, everybody. I reserved the superintendent's report for this issue because I knew that we'd probably have a number of parents here, and I want to thank you for coming out. So some of the points made tonight I do want to respond to, and there are some options that we could offer. So, you know, moving Forest Park as the only solution to this problem, that's not something I necessarily looked at. Because, as I mentioned last time, there's more than one goal, and unfortunately Forest Park is the furthest school away from Hamilton. So Hamilton's a school that I want to add to, and Forest Park is one that I would look to take away from. I'm trying to do this in such a way that we would not have multiple changes in a short span. So that is something that I don't know for certain that it would. If more changes were needed, I would bet that they would be very minor going forward. And I don't think that we would need one for a couple of years, although I can't promise that because I don't have a crystal ball and would know, who's moving into what neighborhood in any given year. So a lot of that is just left to whatever happens in terms of people moving into the community. So a couple of points that were made tonight. One is an idea that I do like, and I see the point in this, and that is adding the Glen and Slocum Woods to the group that is moving to Hamilton. That can happen. What would likely occur would be that Hamilton would then be a school that would be bumping over 90%, which is doable. And Stony Lane would then be a school that's roughly around 85%, which is the area that you'd like to be. Right now, with the proposal that I put together, it's just the opposite. Stony Lane's a little over 90%, and Hamilton is at 85%. But there is something good to that proposal in that those two neighborhoods both are the only neighborhoods from Stony Lane that go to Wickford. So that kind of separation from most of your friends from Stony Lane that happens at the end of 5th grade would not need to occur if those neighborhoods moving together would go to Hamilton. Now, if a school committee member proposes that they want to look at that option, I'm happy to do it, and we could do it next time, but what I would suggest to the committee is that we add a meeting to talk about this, because right now it's scheduled to be voted on next time, and I would want to give any new parents who are being informed that their kids are part of a move too to have a chance to come to our auditorium and say their piece as well. and hear what they have to say. I think that's only fair. So that would add one meeting onto the process, which we can do that too. Another suggestion, Mrs. Langfield and a few others mentioned this tonight, and that is grandfathering grades 3 through 5. That can happen with the current proposal. It would slow down that change a little bit, and it would probably make the first year at Forest Park be really close to capacity, but it would be under capacity is what our projection would be. So it could work out that way. And I don't know for sure about a promise about the busing situation, but no one tonight asked particularly about that. Again, if it would make it easier on us if you could still get your child to the nearest bus stop that works out to, continue to go to the school that they have been going to. But I can also come back to the committee after 2 weeks and just with a yes or a no as far as can we continue with the old bus stops the way they were for those 3 years to phase them out that way. I think I can do that, but I don't want to promise that. As far as the Hamilton resources go, I agree with you on both counts. The light or the lack of a light at that intersection has been a sticking point for me for many years. I requested that the state or that the town look at putting a light there when I was first superintendent. That is actually a state road, so it has to be a state decision, and at the time they decided that it was not needed, so they didn't put one there. I have renewed that request after that accident that you mentioned, and fortunately no one was hurt in the accident. It was a student on a van coming into the school, and fortunately, again, no one was hurt. But maybe having an accident is something that will get their attention, and maybe that'll change in terms of seeing a need. In terms of the parking lot, that's a much more difficult conversation. That obviously is our responsibility to make that work, but you're limited in terms of options there. So we may have to look at something creative for that. If we get to a point where we're looking at some kind of major school construction bond down the road, whether that includes a middle school or some reorganizing of schools, again, this would be something 8 to 10 years out before anyone is moving a school under this kind of scenario. That would be the type of moment where you could include, kind of a parking lot reorganization for a school or two to address things like that. But short of that, I'm not sure what kinds of options we would have other than making maybe the drop-offs at different times or something, or staggering them to make sure that the traffic doesn't get too heavy at any one time. That's all I can think of off the top of my head. But so that is my, I intentionally put this topic up front here just to be able to respond to people's comments. And now I would leave it with the school committee and just ask if they have any proposal that they would like to see, and it involves adding new kids to who's being moved, or different kids to who's being moved, that I would ask that we keep it on the agenda for 2 more meetings, just to make sure that everybody, again, and what I would do is I would put together a proposal, a 1B proposal, or maybe a 1B and a 1C, and I would publish them to the community like I did the first one, and let people know this is where we've evolved to, and that we would be discussing those at our next 2 school committee meetings in 2 weeks, and then in 4 weeks from now we would take a vote.
So any school committee members with questions for Dr. O'Shea?
Can you go back over the traffic light? So it's a state road.
Yes.
You've put in a request
Yes.
for them to look. Who does that request
I
go to?
put in a request with the town manager, and at the time, Mike Embry was the town manager, and I discussed it with him and with the chief of police, which at the time was Chief Mulligan. Mm-hmm. And they sent a request to the state, because it's Boston Neck Road, it's a state road. And I also think Phil Bergeron was involved, the head of the Department of Public Works in town. So they put that request in, and it was denied. That was several years ago, about 8 years ago now. So I did, the day of that accident, call Ralph Mollis to ask him to renew the request, and he said that he would. So
Okay.
I'm waiting to hear more.
So we're just waiting to hear
Yeah.
what that, okay. Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Jones?
Yes, thank you. I would just add on to that, state law requires, let me get it specifically, that the local police certify before the start of every school year the safety of all bus routes. So an option you have is to go to the town and specifically say, when you're doing your next review of that, you know, have you looked at that intersection, which I assume they would because it's part of the route, and maybe make the same requests to go, why are you, even though it's a state road, are you perhaps considering that it's maybe not as safe as we think? And
We can't really go back and forth, I'm afraid.
oh, okay. So just again, another option that going before them too, they have public comment on that. I would add that usually options are good, data changes, so it may be prudent to let this cycle through another cycle and let the superintendent digest. One of the problems we have at these meetings is it's not like we get together for coffee during the non-meeting times and talk about these things because we're basically not allowed to. So when you sort of are presented with new ideas, it's tough to digest it right on the surface, and then that's obviously why we have a superintendent to do all that for us. So I might think it prudent to at least delay the vote
No,
to consider more options. And I would just add the final point that it's understandable in a small context to go, why small, why not big, why not, as the superintendent mentioned, I'm hoping it's not 8 to 10 years. Well, Mrs. King will probably remind me things don't move as fast, but we are vetting, we vetted one major consolidation. I think we're vetting a second option soon on that, and if that, at least gets to the voters in 18 months or so, that will affect a major change for the whole town. Granted, it's going to take the 4 or 5 years if the voters approve and construction is done, but I would hate to do a major overhaul now and then 2 years from now people go, and there's going to be another major overhaul in 4 to 5 years. I understand, obviously, for any one family, one child, any impact's going to be significant. So I think it is prudent to wait. But again, I would say one of the reasons to try and go smaller is we do perhaps have a bigger vision in mind, and we need to let that play out to see if that goes somewhere or not. If it doesn't, then we'll have to probably do a major redistricting as well as some major ideas on how to keep our schools going for another 20 years.
One point I want to talk about with the number of years between redistricting. We have not had any redistricting of elementary schools since 2010 in this district. So it's been actually quite a while. Previous to that, there were about 3 or 4 redistrictings in about a 6 or 7 year period. That was the time when the school committee went back and forth between having K through 3 schools and 4 or 5 schools and that sort of thing. So right now there's no elementary student in our system that has been ever redistricted. So I'm happy about that, and I certainly get the disruptiveness of doing this over and over again. So part of my goal in all of this is to try to keep this to a minimum if we can. And like I said last time, to try to affect as few students as I possibly can. Not that this is any more nice for the students affected, but trying to keep that number to a minimum. And this would affect roughly 56 students total out of 4,000 students in the district. So that's a relatively low number and not a major redistricting like Channel 10 said it was. It's a redistricting. I don't know how major it is.
So to sort of go along with what you said, I was going to make the point as well that, been able to avoid doing any types of moving of boundary lines for quite some time. There's a point where it becomes untenable to keep everything as it is. One thing that I can tell you is that while, it is entirely possible that, some small changes might need to be made in the coming years, I don't envision any situation where any of the students that would be affected by this redistricting, meaning anyone who's changing schools now, would then be sent to a different school later, okay? And that is one of the things that, I would be committed to avoid. Back at the period prior to 2010, that was happening, where, students were moving from one school to another school, but then they got sent back to the school they started from. That kind of thing was happening. So while it could be that due to an enrollment change, we need to move one of these lines and maybe move one neighborhood over to another school again, and we're going to try to avoid that, but we would not be, at least I would not vote for anything that now took someone who's moving now, if this goes through, and then putting them back or putting them in a different school. We wouldn't want to do that. With respect to the proposals, the idea of putting this out there was to get a discussion going. I would definitely like to see, more detail from Dr. Auger on what the effects would be of extending the grandfathering a little bit to the third and fourth graders. If we're able to do that and and the numbers work and it allows us to implement this more slowly and it is less disruptive, I'm absolutely willing to look at doing that. It opens up a little bit of a slippery slope because I could see us getting some, lower grades asking, well, if you did third grade, why can't you do second? But I'd like to see what the numbers look like. So that's definitely possible. With respect, correct. So right, 3, 4, and 5 would have.
No,
sorry.
Well, 5 is gone. 5 will be in middle school, so it's really just third and fourth.
Right. Okay. Sorry. I see what you're saying now. I'm thinking a year ahead.
So
and you're
next
thinking
year it
right.
would be just be the fourth and fifth graders.
Yep. So I would be definitely willing to look at extending that grandfathering a little bit as long as the numbers work. And now with respect to the other options of looking at moving the Glen, I'm amenable to looking at that. My concern is that we will have a new group of people who are unhappy with that decision as well. I understand your point that by keeping this small, it's concentrating the effect on your children. I understand that, but we also have to look at, we have to look at a big picture as well, and to have 100 more people who are upset at the redistricting in this room, I don't think that really helps the problem when you're looking at a big picture, which is what we have to be doing. That's my concern with doing that. I don't know what other folks' thoughts are if we want to,
I think my bigger concern is the viability of the bus and whether or not that we are going to fill that bus and what
you're gonna
the viability of the bus and whether or not that bus is going to be filled or I have concerns about that as well. So
with the proposal that we have today.
the proposal that's on the table today of the Quinessa buses.
Oh, okay. Oh, I have to see what you're saying. The lottery bus. Okay.
And whether
Well,
or not there is interest in, yes, a few families I'm sure are interested, but like I have concerns about that.
so, well, I think the big question I'd like to hear from folks are if we want to look at expanding the change into the Glen or not. I think looking at adding grandfathering in is not an issue. I think we can certainly look at that. Do we want to open up and notify parents in another neighborhood that we might be moving them as well?
How many, say again, how many kids, if we open up those other 2 neighborhoods, how many more children or families are impacted?
I don't have,
I don't know, a lot?
if, right now, the notes that I have, and I'm going to come back with better than this next time, but if the Glen were included and we limited the lottery bus to 40 students, we would be looking at Hamilton being at 415 kids. That would be 92% capacity, which is doable. And Stony would go to 371 kids. They would be at 82% capacity if those 2 conditions occurred. Again, the lottery bus is still an unknown. It could, but we could cap it at 40 just to make sure we don't go better than 92% at Hamilton. That gives us, an 8% buffer there, allows for expansion from the neighborhood and that sort of thing. The nice thing about the lottery bus, too, even though it's an unknown, it does give us kind of a year-by-year safety valve for Hamilton. If we find that Hamilton's getting too tight, we can have a year where we say we just don't have any more room on that lottery bus for this year. We're not taking any names, or we're just taking, a few names instead of, and that's going to happen no matter what, grade by grade. We may have 10 slots available at Hamilton in second grade, but we only have 5 in first grade. There may come a year where we're getting so tight at Hamilton that we say, for a year, we're not going to add any students other than siblings of students who are already there, that kind of a thing. So that way you can kind of control it for, how it is, how the capacity and the enrollment year by year. So that's actually a nice feature of having that bus.
Okay, so let's wrap things up and move along. So to summarize, let's put where I think things stand. So Dr. J definitely would like to have some firm numbers if we were to allow more grades to have the grandfathering option that we've already said we'll offer to the 5th graders.
Okay.
I would like to see and talk about what the effect would be if we were to include the Glen neighborhood as well. But it will put off making a vote. We wouldn't vote at our next meeting, as we've talked about. We would go one additional meeting after that, because I want to give any other potentially affected families an opportunity to comment on what that proposal would entail as well.
I would also ask that when it comes back with the proposal with that families of current 3rd and 4th graders all around would be grandfathered in.
You mean if we...
Or
It applies to the Forest Park students as well.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
that would be-
and to if you did a new proposal, including the Glen and Slocum in that also.
Right, well, I
Yes,
think we need
yes.
to consider that, because that
Right.
will change the equation.
Right.
Because if we are adding more students to this potential change, that means that there would be more potential students in the grandfathered grades, which could change the numbers and make it untenable.
Right.
So it really
Okay.
is part of it. So, to the comments that some people made that we had one proposal on the table, the point is to begin a discussion, we have to begin a discussion somewhere. So now we have, a couple potential options that we'll look at going forward. We won't make a decision at our next meeting. We'll continue to have citizens' comments on it, and we would plan on making a final decision at the meeting following that as to exactly what we want to do with these options. If everyone's comfortable with that. Okay.
Great.
All right, then
Thank
I think
you.
we'll
I
move
have
on.
my marching orders. Thanks.
Okay. So moving on with the meeting, next item are our routine items. If I could have a motion to seal the executive session minutes of February 19th, 2019. I have a motion from Ms. Hoskins, second Ms. Hildebrand. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? This is today. This is today's. You were there. All right, I think we're all good. That passes unanimously. Next, we have, I can disclose that no executive session votes were taken at the meeting this evening, February 19th, 2019. For the consent agenda, I am going to exempt items E5 and E7. Do any other members have anything they would like to exempt? Bob, you weren't at...
Yeah, I'm trying to find.
It's C1 and 2.
Yeah, C1 and 2.
So C1 and 2. If there are no others, if I could have a motion to approve the non-exempted consent agenda items. We have a motion from Ms. Hoskins, second Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. C1 and 2, I think we can take together, so I'll make a motion to approve items C1 and 2. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second from Ms. Hoskins. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Yes, abstain.
Mr. Robert Jones is abstaining, being not present. The next non-exempted item is E5. We're going to remove that with unanimous consent unless anyone objects, because we are not ready to take up that item at this time. Leaving E7, I'm going to make a motion to approve item E7. Second, Ms. Hoskins. I just did that. We'd already said thank you, but I wanted to, once again, make the note that you have had many years of dedicated service to the district. You're going to be sorely missed, but I, for one, am going to vote for your retirement, so you don't have to stay here forever. You are
This is your last chance to back up.
That's right.
You know.
Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Good luck. Next, we have item F1, which is the approval of the visual art and design curriculum. Any questions on that? If I could have a motion to approve? I have a motion, Ms. Hildebrand, second, Ms. Hoskins. If there's no discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, a little bit of heavy lifting now. Tonight is the night we need to do a approval of the 2019-2020 school budget. We need to approve the individual numbers. Mrs. King, we're going to put you on deck here. So I think the easiest way to do it would be to start with our grant funding, then the enterprise funding, and then work on the general fund, if that works for you.
It does.
Or
Would you like me to explain a little bit about the state aid number before we?
yeah, okay. Yeah, so let's go over that in general first. Sure.
So I'm going to try my best.
I don't think your mic is on there. Yeah.
There we go. I'm going to try my best to explain the state aid numbers. It's very confusing, so I'm going to take you back. Two of our members were not here at the time. So in October or November of 2017, when we were doing the budget for FY19, which is the year we're in now, we were informed at that time by the state that our state aid numbers were going to be reduced more than $500,000. It was about $520,000. The communication from the state was that that was really $1.5 million adjustment that was getting spread out over the last 3 years of the funding formula. So that would have been FY19, 20, and 21. The communication was that because median family income in the town of North Kingstown had increased, especially compared to state median family income, and housing values had increased, that's why we were seeing such an enormously huge shift in state aid. Mr. Jones and I had several conversations about it. It did not make any sense, even with adjustments and a new town valuation. I communicated with RIDE multiple times, and those were the answers that we got. So Dr. Auger and I and the staff moved forward, and we had to cut $1 million from our budget from last year before we presented it to the school committee, because just rolling over is more money. So we went into this year's budget, looking for $500,000. Then sometime in July, I got another communication from the state that said our numbers were going to be reduced another $60,000 times 3, because there was some miscommunication between the town and the state and RIDE regarding tax information. So we took another hit. So now we're looking at $1.8 million over 3 years. So starting this year, Dr. Auger and I fully expected we were going to start off needing at least $600,000, if not more. Fast forward to about November of 2018, just a few months ago, I get our state numbers, and they're pretty flat to what we had for this year. So I reached out to the state, and I said, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because we were thinking we were going to go down at least another $400,000 or $500,000. And I got the same answer in reverse from the state. Your median family income is down, and your property values are down. So clearly, none of this makes any sense. I reached out to them, and I finally was able, with the holidays and everything, able to have a conference call with them. And it turned out in December, the RIDE found out that there was some sort of an error, and I have no information for anybody, but there was an error with the state E-Wave data. And Mr. Jones is much more versed in this than I am, but there's data that the state, so the state is the Department of Revenue, gives to RIDE in order to process the funding formula changes and the funding formula number for all the districts every year. That's all I know. So fast forward to now, we are finding out that from the budget that I presented to you in January, we are going to have an adjustment in state aid next year that's really partially because we should not have been cut as much this year as we were cut, which impacts next year as well. So the number that we're looking at for state aid next year is about $10.4 million. I had budgeted just about $10 million. There's also some more adjustments. We are going to have to start paying for training school students if we have any attending there. And I just want to caution you that that number includes a prior period adjustment. So in other words, what I mean by that is part of that $10.4 million is adjusting for money we should not have been cut in the current year that we're in. So the caution for you on that is just because it's not going to keep going up, and that number is, if everything were perfect, is probably going to go down to about 10.2 next year. So I just want everybody to understand that. I think, I don't know, the way these state, you've seen a lot of districts have reached out to RIDE, they've reached out to the General Assembly. There are so many districts seeing wild swings, sort of like we saw last year, or this year, we saw wild swing going down. Some districts last year saw wild swings going up. Now they're seeing wild swings going down. Our neighbor East Greenwich is seeing wild swings. South Kingstown is seeing wild swings. So all I can say is that we go into this with this number knowing that next year, if everything is the same, which it won't be, it is not going to be that number. The other thing I would also have everyone understand, that number has not yet been adjusted by our March census data. So the funding formula is based on what's called average daily membership. And it's not based on, okay, the district has 4,000 students, so your funding formula is based on 4,000 students. It's based on the attendance of those 4,000 students. That's basically what average daily membership means. So that number is likely to go down somewhat, because it always does every year, just based on ups and downs in enrollment and in attendance. That number won't come out until late June. So we know what our census is in March, but the final adjusted state aid number based on this new formula, we won't know until the end of June. So when you're making any adjustments to the budget tonight, I would just ask you to keep that in mind.
Thank you, and just want to point out, Mr. Jones has for many years been making the point, and I know we will continue to, that our charter requires that we take this budget vote this evening, but yet we are voting on, every budget is an estimate, no budget is locked in stone, but we have a great number of very large unknown numbers that make up our budget at the point that we need to make this approval, which is why we do the best that we can with the figures that are available, but it often requires some further adjustments down the line. So any questions on, other than what the heck is going on at the Department of Education and Revenue, any questions on what Mrs. King just explained with respect to the state aid figures? Okay. Dr. Jay.
I'd like to ask the committee tonight if looking to cut back on the proposed budget number, that you do so by looking at numbers for the cash involved, and not necessarily for what that might represent. As has just been stated, there's a lot of pluses and minuses, and the town has a chance to weigh in on this as well over the course of the spring. So at that time, I'd like to come back and kind of reprioritize what it is that I've put into the budget in terms of, why the number is where it is. And so instead of saying, well, the superintendent proposed, this staff member, and I'd cut that one, I would say cut the equivalent money, but and then we'll make that work. And there will be a proposal coming to you after the town gives us the final number, and where all of the numbers will line up with what that town number is. And I will have a chance to kind of look at where we are in May and prioritize at that point.
Thank you. And that actually is a segue into a point that I make every year, and I give credit where credit is due, because Mr. Welsh on the town council would make this point when he was sitting in this chair on the school committee every year. Just a quick refresher for folks who don't come to every school committee meeting, though I can't imagine why you wouldn't. The way this works is we are now voting on what we are asking the town for. We're approving our budget, and with that is a component that comes directly from the taxpayers, which is levied by the town council as part of your taxes. We don't have an independent taxing authority on a school committee, so we can't raise money on our own. The town will go through its own budget process based on what we've asked for, and they will tell us you are getting X amount of money. That may be what we asked for, that may be less, it usually isn't more. And then we come back again, and we do this all over again, and we need to make our final budget match with what the town has given us. We always make the point that part of the advocacy for any programs that people are attached to, or general school funding and quality in general, it does start with this part of the process. So coming to the school committee after the town has voted on their own budget is going backwards, because at that point we can no longer, if it comes to our later on budget process and we've decided to put some particular program on the table for a reduction, and you people come to the microphone and say, please don't cut this thing, it's too late then. We don't have the money, and if we can't spend money, we can't have. So it's important to also advocate during the budget hearings and the budget process at the town council for the school department budget in general and any particular priorities that you may have, because everything that we do is based upon the funding that we receive from them. So having made that point, so going back a little bit, we usually do the grant funding first, because that is a simpler number. So Mrs. King, if you have that, we can
Yes.
make a motion.
The FY20 budgeted grant funding number is $2,189,858.
And no cents. For simplicity's sake, I'll do these. So I'm going to make a motion that we adopt the budgeted grant number of $2,189,858. I have a second. I heard Ms. Huskins first, but she's closer to me. Any discussion on that item? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next would be our enterprise funds.
Individually, food service enterprise fund revenue, $954,197.
Sorry, 9,000,054.
Nope.
Oops, sorry.
I wish.
Try that out. I was going to say, whoa, wait a minute, that makes no sense. Let's try this again.
954,197.
954,197. And I'm going to take a moment to make a point that that is revenue, correct?
Revenue.
Which years ago, for those folks who've been watching long enough, the food service years ago would actually run in a deficit. And due to a lot of hard work by that department and the administration, that is now actually not only self-sustaining, but we have funds that we can reinvest into the program as well. So I'll make a motion to approve the food service enterprise fund amount of $954,197. Do I have a second? I have a second from Mr. Tony Jones. Any discussion? Mr. Robert Jones.
I was going to make your point. I was going to.
I beat you to it.
Yes, so that's fine. Don't want to belabor it. I would just again point out that the biggest chunk of this is reimbursement. I think Mrs. King is right, from the federal government.
A lot of it is, yes.
Right. So it's again vitally important. Our families realize this, and families who are eligible sign up, not only because it's, I think, important that kids get a meal if they're eligible to it, but when we don't get reimbursements, it hurts this enterprise fund. And as Greg said, in years past, we used to take from other operational things, a bus, it's a real cost to have to fund that deficit. So I think our administration and food service folks do a good job in our schools at outreach, but it's really important that families who are eligible take advantage of this and realize it's not automatic. They have to, renew every year. I think that's right, Mrs. King?
Yes.
So, but again, good that we're not only running a surplus, but we reinvested in things like the Love Your Lunchroom and that kind of stuff.
Equipment.
So we had a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next enterprise fund.
The next three are easy numbers. We have an enterprise fund that we started last year. It's the computer repair maintenance program, and that is $30,000 budgeted for FY20.
Okay, so I will make a motion that and is that a revenue, or I just want to make sure I do it right?
It is. These are all the revenue numbers.
That's the ins.
but
Okay, just want to make sure.
They're the revenue numbers, but the expenses will not exceed that number.
Will not expense, so it'll zero out. Okay, good.
Right.
Just want to make sure I have it right. So approve the budget of $30,000 for the computer and technology enterprise fund. And that was a motion, I don't think I said that. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
The next fund is the Gate Receipts Fund for athletics, and that's budgeted at $25,000.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the Gate Receipts Enterprise Fund at $25,000. I have a second from Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
And the last one is the Sports Camp Fund, $60,000.
So I'll make a motion that we approve $60,000 for the Sports Camp Enterprise Fund. I have a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
So the total of those four enterprise funds are $1,069,197. And again, for people to understand, the enterprise fund, if there is any deficit in that fund, it needs to come from general operating. So especially the computer repair, the gate receipts, and the sports camps, those will not go over. And food service, as discussed, has been a lot better to manage in the last several years.
Thank you. We don't need to approve the total, do we? Oh, because we did the parts. Right, just checking. Okay, so we need to open a discussion now for the general fund budget. Any members have any comments, questions, or changes they'd like to make? I'm going to make one suggestion. As Dr. Auger said, I'm going to do as he requested and make a reduction in the dollars with the instruction that we look at the position itself later. While I don't doubt that there may be a need for an additional administrating position that was proposed by Dr. Auger, I'd like to be able to hold off on making a final decision on that in our future discussions. And so I'm going to make a motion that we reduce the superintendent's proposed budget by the amount that I was given for the approximate cost of that position of $145,000. I have a second from Mr. Tony Jones. Any discussion on that? Hearing no discussion. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Here's where we need to start crunching some numbers, so you have that one, Mrs. King. So we do, I think we need to make an adjustment for the adjustment from state aid, because when we had the superintendent's proposed budget, Mrs. King did not have the state aid numbers. So we need to make an adjustment for that. So, let's see. Mr. Jones, did you want to talk to that? Or?
Yeah, well, just to start a conversation, I would make a proposal to adjust the budget in the amount of $208,323 by reducing the town tax request by that amount.
That would be in addition to the change I made.
Yes.
Right. Yep.
Right.
208.
323, which is essentially taking 10% off the town tax percentage request.
The ask from the town, okay. So we have
And making the appropriate adjustment to the
is that a motion?
state education line. Yes.
Okay, and that would be offset on the other side, right? You follow that, Mrs. King? Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second from Ms. Hoskins. So just for discussion purposes, if you're not following what Mr. Jones is saying, or if the audience isn't, so what we would be doing is adjusting the budgeted state aid number by essentially 10% of the bottom line budget, which is $208,323, which would reduce the amount we are requesting in taxpayer funds by 10% of what was proposed. Did I say that properly?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Which is in line with what I was discussing. So that is an adjustment that brings our number much closer in what our projected state aid number is, but still gives us a little bit of wiggle room just in case we need to make some adjustments later on. So any further discussion on the motion? Okay.
Well, you stole my thunder. So,
I did it again. Sorry.
But I could hold everyone here for a 1-hour discussion on the state funding formula, so I'll condense it to 30 seconds. I thank the committee and the superintendent on passing the resolution to stabilize the state aid. I don't know if it'll make any legs with the General Assembly. and it's been my frustration now for 5+ years of doing these budgets. At least one less frustration was, while the state aid funding formula creates a lot of variability, one thing you could at least count on was that the number you were originally given generally was accurate and consistent, even though it may vary wildly in terms of the amount. This year is vastly different. Not only, as Mrs. King mentioned, there's a plug the governor put in for the training school, which has to be approved by the General Assembly, which may not, which may mean we get more aid. It may get approved. The number was thrown out of thin air of 35,000. So again, add on the fact that we don't get our health insurance and other premiums until March. I did lose the battle with the Charter Commission to say I vote for this budget knowing that we possibly could make some cuts. I know the superintendent puts forward a budget with the resources he thinks he needs to really advance the education. We balance it with the responsibility that we have to fund it. There potentially could be more cuts coming. There potentially could be savings, that a decision with the town in terms of reinvesting it back in the schools, or taking more off the tax levy. It's just incredibly frustrating that this year so much of the budget is unknown, and to have to pass a budget that is at best a best guess. I appreciate the hard work the administration does to put it together, because they put it together months before some of these unknowns, and then to get hit with these last minute changes. I would just say, as citizens, you should demand better of your state. Really, that we can't have an education department and a funding formula that provides some consistency when the state talks incessantly about following Massachusetts and long-term planning and following curriculum and doing this, but they can't get a resource plan that supports it. It's just, I'll just say, challenging at best.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second on that reduction. So just to refresh your memory, so that would be reducing the town tax, the request for funding from the town of $208,323 with a appropriate offset to the state aid figure as well. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Are there any other changes that anyone would like to propose to the proposed budget? If not, Mrs. King, I need you to do some math, because as I've mentioned in the past, we need to approve the actual bottom line dollar amount, which with those changes is?
I just want to be clear on what we're doing here, so I'm going to repeat what we did for the record. So we reduced expenses in the form of salary and benefits by $145,000, and we reduced the requested town property tax allocation by $145,000. We then increased the state aid allocation based on previous commentary by $208,323, and we further reduced the town property tax allocation by that amount of money. So in total, from the January 15th budget that Dr. Auger presented to you, we reduced the town property tax allocation request by $353,323, which effectively is a request of 3.32% over the current year we're in.
What was that percent again, sorry?
3.32%.
3.2, thank you.
So really, effectively, the only thing that impacted the bottom line, because we did a flip-flop in the revenue, the only thing that reduced the bottom line was the $145,000 salary position. So that reduces the general fund operating budget to $67,816,866.
Thank you. Everyone follow that?
Yep.
Good, okay. And I'll just make the point, Dr. Auger, with respect to the reduction at the present time, we'll revisit that with you having the discretion to, make the appropriate adjustments until we revisit this. So I will make a motion that we approve the general fund budget number of $67,816,866. have a second? I have a second from Ms. Hoskins. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, we send that to the town, and we will be revisiting that, unfortunately. Anything else with respect to the 2019-20 budget? I think we've covered that. CIP, existing bond or future
Note on
bond?
that, yeah.
Yeah, quickly, we do just want to update you. I was at RIDE today getting final approval on the construction documents for the athletic complex. That's going to be going out to bid by the end of this week. We expect the timeline will be that we will come to the school committee on April 9th for approval of the contractor.
Okay, excellent.
So it's moving right along.
All right. No new business. In your packets, there are the financial reports with the check registers of the school committee accounts alphabetically and in order of amounts, as well as a number of general budget reports. Any questions on those reports?
Just
Yes,
a comment. So,
Mr. Jones.
weighing in something I saw, but I can ask Mrs. King about it. I think it relates to the high school. That's just an opportunity that we can bring up about the play.
Good point. So, you want to...
So I will ask Mrs. King and the superintendent separate, but I think it relates to our trauma stuff. It's a good thing to note that we have a Les Mis?
Yes,
Les Mis?
Les Miserables will be performed right here on this stage, and that stage, by the way, is a very special Broadway stage. There's actually a circular piece that revolves as part, so adds a little glitz to the whole program. But if you're not familiar with North Kingstown High School musicals, you need to become familiar with it. Take your kids. It is a very special event, and this year they're going to do 2 weekends. This entire area is filled with a pit of all-state musicians.
Live orchestras.
It really is something special, and it's one of the great reasons to live in North Kingstown, in my opinion. I see it every year. My kids have been involved in them through the years, and it really is a special thing. So I encourage everyone to come on out. The first weekend is not this weekend coming, but the weekend following that, and then they're going to do it for a second weekend. I think this is the first time we do it for 2 weekends.
And tickets are available at Dave's Market, so you can go to any of the local Dave's Market and buy tickets.
And you can also contact the high school, and they'll take care of you.
There was a sign at Dave's today. All right, then we've reached the end of the agenda. I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. So moved. I have a motion from Ms. Hoskins. Second, Ms. Hildebrand. All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you for coming this evening.